What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Strength Coach Rants. I'm your host, Connor Lyons, and today we're going to be talking about the best possible pathways towards success in athletics when it comes to your child.
I don't want to hear you, 'cause you cannot master the stress.
All right, so welcome back. This week we're going to be talking about the best pathways towards success when it comes to your young athlete. And this kind of piggybacks off of the last episode where we talked about how the youth sports industry is a total racket and the business model is destroying American families. I had a clip of that episode just absolutely blow up. I think between the reel itself and all the various remixes, something like 3 or 4 million total views. And all I did was break down like the cost of your child competing in these sports from 12U, or the age of 12 rather, all the way up until they went to college. And the numbers were pretty astronomical, with sports like hockey knocking on $450,000. And it seemed that the barrier to entry was right around $8,000 a year. That's if you want your child to play the quote unquote elite or high level play, which today is really just, it's like travel and club, because after you get done with rec, there is nowhere else to go. You have to go to this all-in, expensive route of youth sports now. There's no way around it, because these like city and youth sport leagues don't exist anymore. And if you want your child to get scouted when they get to high school, outside of like football and basketball, the odds are pretty small. You're gonna have to invest your time and money into playing on one of these club or travel teams in an effort to get looked at, because the whole landscape of sports has completely changed over the course of the past 10 years. So I got a ton of DMs from parents. I think some people really missed what it was. It seemed like a lot of parents in the comments were complaining that I didn't talk about other sports. And what I was trying to talk about was like traditional American team sports that would lead to college at some point, right? Like things like figure skating and cheer and equestrian and motocross. Like those are all very expensive sports, but they've been expensive like forever, right? These are sports that used to cost in the hundreds of dollars a year, now costing families sometimes, $20,000, $30,000 a year just for their child to be able to compete. And that was the message I was trying to send. It wasn't like a pissing contest about who spends more money with sports. The overarching theme should have been like it's a racket. We're spending entirely too much money when you look at the data. And I'll put that episode down in the description for you guys. But what I want to talk about today was a alternative path, right? I know as parents you get boxed in to having to have your kid play these sports with these clubs and these travel programs and playing year round if you want them to play. It seems like there's like no way around it. But it's setting your child up for not success, right? For disappointment and not making it to where they want to go. And I'm going to lay out my case for like a better way to do that today. First thing I wanted to talk about was the specialization, right? Because a lot of these kids are being forced into specialization at like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, not just within a sport, but within a position. And that's so problematic when it comes to like long-term development and the overall like long-term success of your kid. It's an absolute trap, and it is designed to get you to spend money with certain coaches and organizations. Like that is the only purpose for it, because every single piece of data that we have shows that is beyond detrimental, both from an emotional and a physical perspective. All right, so we need to really get out of that mindset of specializing and playing one sport at such a young age. Another issue that we have is like the hyper focus on sports skill, right? It's like we've forgotten the fundamentals of things. Kids aren't being taught how to sprint anymore. They're being taught how to do an obstacle course of cones. Kids aren't being taught to shoot the puck anymore. They're being taught to like toe drag, spinorama, between the legs shot. Like kids, it happens in every sport. Like your baseball players, you've got these like 11, 12-year-olds on like velocity programs and weighted ball programs instead of just learning the fundamentals of throwing, right? We're absolutely destroying their arms at a very young age, with the average age of Tommy John surgery being about 15 and a half years old. You could imagine if you make it all the way through high school without it, most teams are thinking you're going to end up needing some kind of work. You don't have a lot of like left in your arm at that point, and they're going to end up losing you for a year, which could be detrimental, even though that might not be the case. Just because of like the vast majority of the way things operate now, right? It's we need to get back to the fundamentals when it comes to both sport and movement. Everything doesn't have to be so specialized, especially at a young age when you're talking about having like very low abilities and training ages. Fundamentals are so important, and it seems like we've just decided they don't matter anymore. I can remember growing up, like all my coaches, we would focus on the fundamentals, right? And we all thought it was so unbelievably boring. But the fundamentals are like what give you a base. And right now, the reason why you can't focus on the fundamentals, because what's going to happen, you're going to take your child to this organization or this coach, and they're going to try to teach the fundamentals. And you're going to sit in the car on the way home and ask like how it went. And, like, did you enjoy it? And the kid's going to say no, because it's boring, because it's the fundamentals. And what is that parent going to do? More than likely pull their kid out of that program and put them into one that's more accelerated and fun for their child. And it's detrimental. So that hyper focus on skill set, it's leading to a generation of athletes who have like very high skill sets and very low sport IQs because they don't understand the fundamentals of the game or movement or just the skills themselves. One more thing I wanted to touch on before we go into this, the LTAD model. I've got an episode where I broke down the LTAD model and everything that I think is wrong with it, and I'll link that in the description below. But the focus needs to be when it comes to developmental models in sports. It needs to be based on, like, I hate to say it, but like really talent level, right? Because if you don't have the basics down yet, you shouldn't move on to the next. If you can't do the fundamentals with your eyes closed, you shouldn't be able to move on to the next level of whatever skill set you're trying to learn. And in the gym, like, biological age means very little. So it means something when it comes to how we're going to adapt to certain stimuli. But your training age, more than anything, is going to dictate what you should be doing. So there needs to be a focus not just on biological age when it comes to total athletic development, both on and off the field. There also needs to be a focus on like training age, playing age, and movement and sports-specific skill sets, right? Those things have to factor in. So take the LTAD model, kind of push it to the side. There's, again, I'll put a link in the description because there's a lot to that. But, skill set, skill age, sport age, training age, and biological age are all going to play like an enormous factor in how you should train an individual and how you're going to adapt to certain things. And then I wanted to touch on this. There is so I guess there was one more thing even. There is such a push to play like a pro style schedule with games, and it's destroying your child's development, right? So let's see your average hockey team right now, right? They're going to play down here in Florida. They're going to play about a 20-game season. And then they're going to play a couple tournaments, and throughout the year, maybe like 4 or 5 tournaments where they may play like another 4 or 5 games in each tournament. So you're looking at like 45 games, and that's on the low end. I work with plenty of kids who have played well in excess of that at like 11, 12, 13 years old, where they're playing closer to 60 games. And the IIHF, so the International Ice Hockey Federation, they're kind of like FIFA for hockey. They did a study, and what they found was that it takes about 11 games to equate to the development that happens in one practice. Now, when I say development, I mean like puck touches, passes, shots, situations, things like that. It takes 11 games. So that 60-game season is like having less than an extra 5.5 like practices. So the way that we approach this with practice and games is completely inverted. And we need to get back on track. These kids should be playing at these young ages. As they get older, obviously, like, it changes quite like drastically. But at like 9, 10, 11, 12, even 13 and 14, these kids should be practicing 4 times for every 1 to 2 games, right? And that just doesn't happen now. We are playing significantly more than we're practicing, or it's closer to like a 1-1. And that's really kind of messing up development because you don't develop in games, right? We develop in practice when there's no real pressure and I can be creative and I can like focus on actually learning a skill, because if I mess up, it doesn't mean that the other team's going to score, right? If I mess up, it just means that I learned something. When in a game situation, it's significantly different when you've got both the coach and your parents screaming at you when you screw up. It changes everything. So we need a much larger focus on practice and skill set development in that setting, right, than we have right now. The games have gotten out of control. All right. So this is what I would do if and when my daughter decides that she wants to play sports, right? There's a way to do things, and there's a way that's going to lead to success. And in my opinion, this is probably the best way to approach it. Now, you cannot discount the genetic factors. Some kids and people are just genetically predisposed to playing at the highest levels no matter what they do, which is why you need to be careful when you see an athlete's training program who's at the top level and you want to emulate it. Because one, totally different scenarios. They need different things than you. But two, they may be there in spite of what they're doing as opposed to because of what they're doing, right? So Dave Tate said this on an Elite FTED podcast like a decade ago. Said in his experience, about 90 to 95% of athletes who are playing at the highest level are going to be there no matter what, just because they're genetically predisposed to greatness when it comes to athleticism. It's about 5 or 10% that can get there on hard work, but they also have to have the genetic predisposition to being somewhat athletic. But you can still work your way to the highest levels if you have that genetic component, and not everybody does. So first, what I want to say when you're a child, this is like kids are first starting out. Pick a bunch of sports. You should pick 2 to 3 sports, and they should play those sports in season, right? And then not play those sports outside of season, right? So hockey, like I'll say hockey in the winter, basketball in the winter, soccer in the spring, and maybe baseball or football or something like that in the fall. And that's how their schedule should look. They should play the sport for about 3 months. Then they should move on to the next one. And in my opinion, these sports should be vastly different from each other. Right? A lot of people are like, oh, you should play lacrosse if you play hockey because they're so similar. And no, like you want to get away from that sport movement skill because you want to develop like total athleticism. That's going to be what carries you as you get older. You want like a variety of movement patterns within your sport to get better at, because that's going to be what A, fights like overuse injuries, and B, like keeps things interesting and keeps you developing as an athlete. If you play sports that are so similar to each other, it's going to make it really hard to continue to develop and not get hurt. It's just the way it is. Like I don't make the rules. That's just what it is. Next point, play like at the rec level or as low a level as you can. There's no need at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old to be jumping into high-level club and travel sports. No one cares what your skill set is at that point, and at that level, those kids are playing entirely too many games, and they aren't practicing enough, which leads parents to have to spend money on skill set development on the side, right? So your kid should play at the rec level or like the lowest commitment level possible at that age. So at 13, 14, I'm just reading off some notes here. At 13, 14, you can start to make a switch. Like I think 14U is a great time to start like a little bit more high level compete. But that's just me. I think prior to that, you should stay as far away from it as humanly possible. This ensures that your kid's only going to be practicing like 1 to 2 days a week with the sport, and that they're only going to be playing like probably 1 day a week. So you're looking at least a 2-to-1 practice to game ratio. And the games aren't all that important. They're fun, but like messing up in those games isn't going to be the end of the world. You can still learn to be creative, and you can learn different situations, and you can learn the sport a lot better. And do not focus on one sport, right? And definitely don't focus on one position, right? I see this all the time. I ask these kids, what sport do you play? And they'll say, I play X sport and I play Y position, right? And at 11, 12, 13, 10, 9, 8, you should be trying everything. You should try like every position imaginable, especially the ones that you suck at, because it's going to teach you the value of having to get better at something, how to work hard when it doesn't come naturally, how to kind of deal with a coach being on you all the time. Like there's a lot of value in doing things that you're not good at and getting better at them. And that'll have nothing but positive influence on the position that you want to play. And hell, you might find that you're a way better defenseman than you ever were a forward, or you're a way better point guard than you ever were a center, or whatever. I know a lot of that's based on height and size and everything, but you might find you're a better wide receiver than you are a quarterback. Those kind of things happen all the time. So stop specializing in sports and specializing in positions, because again, we're talking about overuse injury. We're talking about long-term longevity when it comes to the sport. That's going to be absolute cancer to it. Find a good sports performance coach. This is the third point here. Find a good strength coach or sports performance coach, and you don't have to be all in. It doesn't have to be crazy 4 or 5 days a week of training. I get parents who think that's the way it needs to be, and it really isn't. From 8 to 10 years old, you could go 1 day a week or once every other week, because the goal is movement patterns. We're trying to get better at squatting, lunging, jumping, decelerating, changing direction, and you can build on those skill sets from a non-physiological perspective, right? So it's not like I have to hit this stimulus to maintain what I've created. It's no, you can just learn these movement skills over time. So it doesn't have to be this crazy, huge financial investment. It is just finding somebody who's going to teach you to move in an environment where you can continuously progress over time. At 11 to, and this is in season, out of season, year round. You want to go once a week to once every other week. It would be more than enough. Now, once you get to 11 to 13-year-olds, you can start thinking 2 to 3 days a week in the off season, 1 to 2 days a week during the season, because at that point, there are some adaptations that we can start to build on, right? So you want to make sure that you're hitting this stimulus often enough to continue to progress over time. And, 2 days a week year round, that would be what I think would be best. So you could say 1 to 2 days a week during the season, 2 to 3 days in the off season. But if you think just 2 days a week, all year long, you're going to be in a great spot. Once you hit 14, 15 years old, that changes a little bit. In the off season, you can hit upwards of 3 to 4 days a week. And that is if it is a true off season and you're not playing your sport. And then during the season, somewhere between 1 and 3 days per week, depending on what your schedule and load on the field look like. But these things need to be year round. It is not an off season thing. It is not, I'm trying to kind of occupy my child's time in the off season and make them better. It is, we are not going to be better for next season at 14. We're going to be awesome when we're 18. We're going to be awesome when we're signing our letters of intent. We're going to be awesome when we get drafted. So you have to look at it from that perspective. And it is a financial and a time investment. But if you are wanting to train and play at the highest of levels, it is a absolute necessity for 99.9% of athletes, right? Even the genetically predisposed ones, if you want to stay on the field and not get injured, you're going to have to. It is part of the game now. In that same vein, training off the field of play should be very general in nature. It should look nothing like your sport. And when I say nothing like your sport, I mean nothing like your sport. You should be developing athleticism, which means the things that you do off the field of play are going to they're going to be the opposite of the things that you do on the field of play. Or go to hockey because it's such an interesting movement skill. In hockey, we do a lot of things in the sagittal plane off the ice for the kids because they spend so much time in the frontal plane, right? Skating is lateral movement for the most part. So we need to teach them to move linearly and vertically because they don't get that stimulus on the field of play, especially if it's a kid that's playing and practicing 4, 5, 6 days a week. They need to not do those things, because if you want to be an athlete, you've got to develop everything, but B, focusing more on those and loading those positions and movement patterns in the gym is going to 100% lead to overuse injury sooner rather than later. So you want your sport or your off the field training to look nothing like you're on the field playing. Just don't do it. It's not necessary. Even with a higher training age, it doesn't make a ton of sense. It can look similar as you get older, but it should never look the same. We should never load sport movement skill in the gym for a ton of reasons, but don't do it. So it should be very general in nature, right? Going back to the fundamentals, that's what we need. We need the fundamentals. We don't need the icing on the cake. We got to bake that cake first. Avoid out of season play, right? Even at 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, you should have a season. That sport should be your focus during that season. And in the off season, you should get as far away from that sport as humanly possible. Couple reasons for this. One, mentally, Like, it drains you to constantly be going after the same thing over and over again. It's going to lead to you like losing your love for the sport. It's not fun anymore when it becomes a job, and it absolutely becomes a job when it's year round. There's the average kid, it's going to become a job too. There are some kids that are just built differently and they love the sport, and it's not going to mess with them emotionally to play year round. But for the vast majority of kids, they need that time away mentally, physically. Right? You've got to heal from the season. You're talking about doing the same repetitive movements over and over and over and over and over again, right? And that is going to lead to some overuse stuff down the road. So you have to make sure mentally and physically you take time away from the game so that you're mentally and physically prepared to go back out there and play. If you take the off season off when it comes time to play again, how excited are you going to be to play versus like, oh, my summer season just ended. I have a week until I have to play fall ball, right? It changes it from a mental perspective. And like I said, from a physical perspective, you need time to heal and then time to develop some athleticism that you're not going to have time for during the season, right? So you can really hammer away at it in the off season and then look to maintain and slightly progress during the season. Stay away from showcases and camps until you're like maybe a sophomore, possibly a junior in high school, because they don't matter. Your kid is not being seen at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. I saw an ad for, there's this hockey showcase over the summer. It was 10U, and they were ranking these kids at 10U, right? Means nothing. No central like scouting database is going to go look into that and add that to their, database for that information. Nobody wants that. Nobody cares. Nobody gives a shit what your 12U, 10U, even at times 14U stats were, right? You need to focus, again, on getting away from the sport and developing as an athlete in the off season, not spending tens of thousands of dollars to go to these showcases and camps that really at the end of the day mean absolutely nothing. So save your money. If there's an experience, like I tell parents all the time, the Pee Wee Quebec 12U tournament is an awesome experience for kids. Like that is a great thing to go off and do. I would recommend it if you get the opportunity to do it. And then the brick, dude, the brick is a very neat thing to be able to say that you did as a child. And I would say have at it, because that is just a fun experience, besides the fact that you're playing a sport. So save your money. Don't go to those camps and showcases throughout the summer unless there is a legitimate need for it. So my last point that I have here is no one gives a shit about your 12U stats. They don't. I cannot emphasize this enough. It's fun to post on social media that your kid did this great thing on the field, right? And you get that little bit of dopamine. You get people saying, wow, your kid's so awesome, and it feels really good. But like, it doesn't matter. Your kid, and this goes back to playing so many games. Your kid should be practicing significantly more often than they're playing, and we've just really inverted that. And I don't know if it's for the vanity of some parents. I don't know if it's for the vanity of some sports organizations who want to win championships at 10 and 12U. Like, I don't know how it happened or why it happened or if it's a combination of everything, but it's really stunted development in the United States in a lot of these sports. And you can sit there and say, well, this kid played every day, 5 hours a day from the time they were 4 or 5, and they made it, right? Sidney Crosby, he was shooting pucks in the what was it, the washer, the front loaded washer or dryer. Yeah, he did. He was going to get there no matter what he did, right? But show me that one kid, and I'll show you 10,000 who did the same thing and didn't end up getting there, and actually probably ended up hurt or quitting the sport or getting into drugs, hating their parents, whatever it is, because they were forced to continuously be very all in with the sport without getting any kind of break. And I'm telling you, your average kid cannot handle that and does not do well with that. And it's no wonder we're seeing at the NCAA level, when surveyed, athletes have significantly higher rates of anxiety and depression than their non-athletic counterparts do at the university level. The same thing in high school. I'll link in the description too to an episode I did where we talked about the stats when it comes to youth depression and anxiety. And they haven't correlated it yet, but I would love to see a study with kids who specialize and play year-round, what their levels of anxiety and depression are, just because, dude, it's massive. The load that these kids have to carry in being treated like professional athletes when it comes to practice, training, and games, it has got to wear them completely out. Waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning to go get on the ice or on the field or in the gym to do some skill set development or training, and then going to school for 8 hours and then getting done and practicing for 3 hours and then getting done with that and coming home and finally eating at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, doing homework and then falling asleep at midnight, not getting enough sleep, not getting enough nutrition, not getting enough time away from the sport, more than likely not getting enough hydration and living off caffeine is a dangerous way for these kids to live, and it's going to lead to just awful outcomes long term for the vast majority of them. Again, you can show me this one kid did this guy did X, Y, or Z. It's just not how it works for the vast majority of people. Those guys get there in spite of doing all those things. So I think that's it. We did it in one take, 25 minutes. Goodness gracious. Thanks for watching, listening. Give us a like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. Go check us out. We're Lions Den Sports Performance right now on Instagram, TikTok. We're Strength Coach University. Facebook, we're Lions Den Sports Performance. On the YouTubes, obviously, we're Strength Coach University. Twitter @based_coach1. If you want to hear some wild takes. Go buy a book. I do this every time. Last time I did it at the beginning. This time I'm doing it at the end. I don't know. Where did I put them? Huh. Well, they're somewhere. Total Hockey Training, Simple Strength, Dynamic Effort Method for Athletes. Check out the website for my blog and then the articles that we write about fitness. There's a plethora of things to kind of sift through there. Go like us and follow us on Apple and Spotify. The Great Strength Debate, I've done 3 episodes now, currently editing some of them, and we're going to start pushing them out next month. Should be like an episode every week where I'm going to have a different strength and conditioning coach. As of right now, one of my former colleagues did an episode. Another colleague that I actually had like my first major debate against in an office, and we'll probably talk about it in the interview itself. Ended up doing some sports science stuff for the New York Yankees. Is currently almost done with his PhD. Very smart guy. We had an interesting debate back in the day, but he's going to be on. Brandon Smitley, I've talked with him. He's going to be on. Just a whole bunch of guys coming through, and hopefully some gals as well. It's going to be a great podcast. It'll be weekly, and it'll be very interesting, just long-form content of me talking to someone else, debating at times, agreeing at times, agreeing at times, and just finding the best possible way to do things. So that's going to be it for today. Go buy a book. Go check out the website. Follow us on all the things. Subscribe, like, do all that, and we'll see you next time.
I don't want to hear you